healing begin.
Do you guys have any comments?
Okay, good.
Love that shirt. Oh, not the comment you were looking for. Okay, sorry.
Okay, so I think by and large, everybody thought this was a very well done meeting, that almost all of the talks were really informative and very nice.
At the correct level, for the most part?
Yeah, the
Okay.
IE talk didn't get universal bad grades, but it didn't do very well.
Okay.
And
Was that the talk or IE?
both.
Yes.
Both. There was a lot of discussion both in our meeting and outside about which it was, and there's some feeling that we should probably be hearing about Avalon, which is what we're told is the next thing that's really going to do all the right stuff, and the IE stuff is a lot of patching. So that's what was the content. We also heard that the person who spoke is capable of giving a talk that was more principled and architectural than we heard, and gave a talk that was better suited to management that was interested in what details are new. And I don't know where that broke. I mean, we all try to convey what the best kind of talk would be, so maybe that person could have given a better IE talk, but maybe IE wasn't the right thing for us to hear about. So, but the other talks really, I think, every meeting they've gotten better, and this meeting was not an exception to that. So that's very nice. Some low-level sorts of things. We're getting a little bit lax on detailed arrangements. The privacy people thought for a while they were going to have a pre-meeting, then this changed, and Dave, you know about all this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
For a read-ahead, all we probably need is a URL with stuff to read, and not 2 weeks is good for some people, 1 day is good for some people, but
Right.
something.
Right.
So that I think everybody understands. You've been busy with all kinds of things lately, but that was noted. There was some questions. We didn't give people enough notice about that there was the Tech Fest slot and when Tech Fest was going to begin and when it was going to end, so if you came early, you didn't know when to go. So these are all low-level details. I'm reporting them because they were discussed. There's this semi-annual crisis of confidence that we seem to have. It tends to coincide with board meetings. I think some people would be a lot happier if, at some point we got pushback about our comments. That is to say, we don't believe that absolutely everything we say, you guys think is absolutely right and go do. So for the cases where somebody's making a recommendation, strongly argues you should do something, if you don't buy it, not you personally, but whoever, it would be nice to hear back. This is wrong because. We never see that.
There's something I said at the
that's
beginning,
precisely what,
which is like my Chief Security Officer's Council. We need to keep a list of all the recommendations, proposals, items, open questions, all that. And then the product groups need to say, we're embracing that, we're rejecting this because,
Right.
And for each recommendation made, we need to keep a spreadsheet. Microsoft has to have an owner of that issue, and they have to get back. We've been doing that with the Chief Security Officers Council, which is, more about, they manage large enterprises. Their issues are a bit different, but we're going to adopt the same process.
Right, that would be great.
and that was the motivation behind getting the list of questions so we can act on.
Just to make sure there's not a flyby here, were you talking about kind of standard recommendations that would come out of kind of the overall outcome, or were you talking about comment during the meeting?
The latter.
Okay,
We don't
good,
expect,
good.
if we can't keep track of what we're saying, we don't expect you to keep track of it.
Perfect. Okay, great.
Another corollary of this is, so the board's term is almost up, everybody knows. If you end up doing an impact study, in your process to decide whether to continue the board would like to see a copy of it. You know, it'd be useful for us to see what you think.
So this is one of the reasons we were talking about this. So we have, right now, our knowledge of the board impact is anecdotal as opposed to rigorous, right? So we know from talking to the product groups that sometimes they might do something based on this meeting, incorporate some feedback, but because we haven't been keeping a list and tracking everything in a really formal way, it's possible to roll up all that data. So anecdotally, Dave and I have talked about this, we do notice certain things just from our experience, and those kinds of things are that the knowledge that the board, for example, exists and meets is broadening within Microsoft because we get inquiries about it. And we get people who want to vet things with the board. And there were some things, actually, one particular paper I'm thinking about, where they really want to present to the board, but we didn't put them on this agenda because they're not quite ready yet. And when I say ready, I don't mean that they're going to finalize things before they come to you. It wasn't ready for any kind of, even under NDA, it just, you know, it wasn't well enough written yet that they felt comfortable presenting, but they already want to be on the next board meeting. So we see that anecdotally. And part of the reason to keep this list is to capture that so we can do a more formal evaluation and show the value of the board, the return on investment, you know, and Sean puts into this all that good stuff.
So I think it's that there's people on this board that are feeling guilty, I'd say, that, you know, they're spending this time and it's not so clear. So if you, even if you related the anecdotes, you know, we're not hearing anything. You know, we meet 6 months later. You know, we're not.
The goal will be once we find out what you know what the issues are that still need some degree of resolution, is to have the turnaround within 30 days. So we get it. We go to or for you know what.
That'd be better.
It may be.
We don't. That might be free, but we don't need that.
There's another level of thing happening. There are long-term decisional changes that happen more than 30 days after the board meets.
Right.
That people in retrospect say, yes, talking about it that meeting caused us to revisit it or gave us a stick to beat our management to revisit it, and that's not going to come in 30 days, but you're going to want to put that on the list too when you can find out about it. And that's good. Okay. There was a lot of discussion about Jeff Freeberg's presentation.
We love Jeff, man. Bring him back every single time.
And I think you should clone him, too.
Well, we agree with the latter point. I'm not sure about
Yeah, so that now
you can only move so fast. You know, at the interval of the meeting, how long
You might want to move to
embrace some of this
California.
stuff.
but that's the issue. There seems to be a sense that there's an underinvestment, that with bigger investments, you guys, and not much bigger investments, you guys would get a lot further, that giving him some test support for privacy would really pay off, that thinking about doing some kind of penetration or red team testing for privacy the way you do it for security would pay off. And I mean, it all equals partly investment, but we can now see concrete opportunities for investment that could pay off rather than just throw money at privacy, because privacy is an important problem. And I mean, while we don't generally talk about this level of thing in this meeting, usually you get it from 13 people, people generally felt that it was worth saying because it's at that level of a consensus.
So the reason Steve and I have been so adamant to get the privacy stuff into the SDL is our experience that unless you inculcate something into the business process, it doesn't happen. And the things that you're talking about, which are essentially are great audit functions once you have a requirement. Okay, so you could do pen testing today on some privacy stuff, but since you don't have any of the developers working on it, I can tell you what the pen test is going to find. And after I find all that stuff, my reaction would be, the goal isn't to fix that stuff. You got to fix the rhythm of the business so that this stuff doesn't happen in the first place. So rather than do this, which is kind of what we've done with security over the years, we said, let's actually do this the right way, which is build it from the ground up, put it in the front end, and then you can do these kinds of things at the test and the pen at the back end as an audit control to make sure the front end things are being done.
So it's a bit of a chicken egg thing. You can't. You probably want to build the test tools and play with them for a while before you start mandating their use. And probably in parallel with having developers starting to play with the idea of adding these things. So I still think there's an opportunity for investment at the back end at this point.
Right, and I think we heard something slightly different from Jeff, which was that even when it's ready and it's built into the SDL, he actually doesn't feel like he has the resources to do what happens on the security side, which to me suggests that the audit functions, the pen testing, etc., is going to be more important. I'm just saying that's what I heard from Jeff. It may be wrong, but that's what I heard.
That's a good comment. I mean, we're still in process, and one of the things, candidly, is that we have a stronger and more clear, high-level mandate around security than we do around privacy at this point. Peter and Scott may disagree with me, but that's my perspective. My vision is that we have I don't know what we'll call it. We have a security development life cycle that encompasses security and privacy in the development process in the same way that today we have one that encompasses security. One of the parts of the security development life cycle is that it's updated every 6 months. And so, as we learn more, we introduce more tools, we introduce more processes, we introduce more requirements on a predictable schedule. But we're still, trying to make that initial leap to get it into the process.
Yeah, so I think one way to think about it is that the investment, as Jeffrey said, that we finished the last rev of the Microsoft privacy standards, the developer standards, and over a weekend he cobbled together a tool that might look like how we might operationalize it in the SDL. That literally was 2 weeks ago. So I think that what you'll see over the next 6 months is kind of a combination of all of what Scott and Steve have just said. So that investment is, quite frankly, already in plan. Now, whether that's
Probably not the point that you can move in parallel tracks.
Yeah. We're certainly doing things in parallel. I mean, we're doing product privacy stuff today without having it integrated in the SDL. I'm loath to build a big parallel structure for privacy to what we have for security, because frankly, the product groups will break down.
I don't think anyone's advocating for that, but you could really leverage Jeff a lot more with a little bit of extra. So Dave will recall, Scott, you weren't here yet. There was this whole discussion about adding somebody from Japan to the board. That was.
We've changed our mind. We're adding someone from Bolivia.
If you think about it, that discussion. So if you think about it, that discussion was a proxy for a different discussion, and the real discussion is there's some ambiguity about board governance. That is, what stuff is it Microsoft's responsibility to deal with? What stuff is it the board's responsibility to deal with in terms of self-governance? Clearly you make the invitations because you send the contracts out. To what extent does the board have input in who you're going to invite? And that ambiguity comes up periodically, and I think we've done really well in 3 years by running it in a low-key fashion so there are never real confrontations and so on. And maybe that will continue. But the 3-year renewal period might be an opportunity to, now that we know how it works, figure out more or less who owns which piece of the problem, what's the interface, what kind of information goes to you, what kind of information flows to us. Do you give us a list and say, here are some people we're considering, we'd like your comments, then we'll make a decision? If that were in place, then I think that's what the Japan conversation was really about.
Yeah, well,
it sounded like it was about Japan, if you know what I mean. So I think you may want to consider that as another to do as part of this 3-year renewal business.
Well, the 3-year renewal definitely is going to be, it's a catalyst on a variety of,
Right.
of fronts. So, quite frankly, we got some thinking that we need to do on our end, and obviously try to come to some conclusions, and then bring you folks into the mix as to how best to act on some of these things. But yeah, point
I'd be
taken.
interested, as you think about this and what your comments are. I mean, as a general rule, I guess the initial selections were made fairly unilaterally.
Pretty much.
Worked fairly well. Microsoft obviously has a range of interests in having, a diverse board. And at the same time, we want collegiality among the board so that the dialogue is open and frank and all that great stuff. Is there a sense that the board is too big, too small, shouldn't have new people? I mean,
So, rather than answer those questions, a process was proposed. Martine proposed it, and it sounded sensible to me, which was that if anybody had thoughts about those questions, they should send them to Deidre, me, or Dave, depending on whether they wanted them anonymized or not. And that would be the way that the board could have it. If you don't trust Deidre and me, send it to Dave.
Or if you want to kick us off, send it to Dave.
Right.
So this is basically the board's version of Survivor. You vote people off the island.
Well, they may not be voting people off the island. They may be saying, look, we think the board needs to be doubled in size. Whatever comments about the content and structure of the board should come up that way. And then I guess Deidre and I will have a discussion with you and whoever else you want involved, and we'll take it.
One thing I wanted to add about Asia, by the way, we've gone through similar discussions within the IEEE and ACM. The Asians feel that they are left out of the professional societies in security. And that came out very clearly in a number of meetings, particularly people from Taiwan, Korea, not Japan, nobody from Japan objected, but basically Taiwan, Korea, and Singapore.
I spend a lot of time in all those places.
Right.
There's some very real both cultural differences and difference about the way they think about the problem. They have infrastructure differences. In Japan, 63% of people are still on narrowband. In Korea, they have more broadband per capita than any other country in the world. And that's why I think about diversity and figuring out how I get the right kind of input.
But also they do have, in some of those countries, particularly Taiwan, very good expertise in security, not just crypto. So
You should send some of the names in. That will be.
Well, in any case, even if we had full, if we had what we consider to be full board participation, it would still be nice to know who you folks at least thought the movers and shakers were out there that might, at some point in the future, make an interesting addition into the board discussions.
So, at this meeting, we had a lot of informational talks, and the board wonders, what is the value to Microsoft of us hearing these informational talks? We all, as I said, we got great stuff out of it. Do you see a value in that?
Let me answer the short answer for me. You and I have talked during discussions about IEEE S&P business, where you have said to me, I've been able to tell people they are essentially out to lunch because of what I have heard from the interaction with Microsoft. I mean, there's the ability for
us, but is it good for you?
Absolutely. From my perspective, the ability to disabuse incorrect notions up front, I think, is immeasurably valuable.
Right, and actually, that was an illusion. The next editorial, IEEE Security and Privacy is an IEEE magazine. It's published quarterly. I believe the next issue...
Half of us are on the board.
Some of us are on the board. I'm the associate editor with Carl Engler. And we rotate who writes editorials, and it was not my turn to write the editorial, but we all bless all the editorials. And there was an editorial on identity management systems. And in the editorial, the author had explained why Microsoft's Passport failed. and it was wrong. And I said, you know, substantiate it, or take it out, or I think this is what happened, and I hadn't heard this talk, and it was revised, so it's a more accurate portrayal. It happens not to be a negative portrayal of Microsoft, which is nice. And it happens also, this editorial comes to a conclusion which supports what you're doing, and that's a kind of nice accident also, but that's what you're alluding to.
So there's actually a few different things. One is, very often, and I see this with a lot of groups I deal with, their advice is based on conditions precedent that they believe to be true, and the condition precedents that they believe to be true are in fact false. And if they had an informational that told them what the real state of play was, it wouldn't give us unactionable recommendations that are based on false assumptions. So one of the goals in doing informationals is to make sure that everybody in the room has the same level of knowledge about a particular problem before we actually get to the point of asking for advice.
So this is investment.
It's investment.
Okay.
The second thing is, and I will say this is an odd thing about the company, there is some sort of line, thin and mushy, between the theoretical, the informational, and what's actually happening in the company. And, you know, Steve and I have talked about this a lot. You know, sometimes we try to do some things and people are just too theoretical. Other people write informational white papers and then you find out they're actually building product. And you know what? It wasn't a think piece. It was their version.
It was a justification
Specification.
document. Yeah.
You know? And so some of the stuff may look informational, but then underneath, so, you know, you had a presentation on the identity management stuff. And there have been white papers and informationals and briefing. They're also about building product. There, you know, you can call it what you want, whether it's an informational or spec. They're building. And so part of it, too, is sometimes how we label those things are a little bit misleading.
Well, for us, the difference between informational and not is not whether product's being built. It's whether there are a bunch of questions that are at the beginning of the talk. Remember, our protocol is if it's not an informational talk, then the first thing they have to tell us is who they are, where they're in the organization.
What's the problem you're trying
and
to
what's
solve?
the question you're asking for board insight about? And, I mean, so that...
But
Otherwise, we make up our own.
Scott and I may benefit from board insight as perceived by your questions or reactions, even to one of the informationals. So I guess I would go stronger than that. You know, that we're always listening, okay, to your for your reactions to whatever is presented to you. It's never that informational.
Okay.
What we'll do with it varies depending on, you know, who and where and when in the product cycle and a variety of other things. But you know, but we don't expect you to just be silent to an informational. If you were, I think we'd be disappointed.
Okay.
We'd lose our reputation after all.
Some of you certainly would.
So then now I have the wish list of what we would like to hear about at our next meeting, assuming there is one.
Well, let me kill that one. There's going to be a next meeting.
Well,
Any changes that would,
contract expires.
no. It's
Maybe not
after.
us will be there.
Well, no. It would be.
Summer's in the contract?
Pardon me?
This summer's in the contract?
Yeah. After the summer meeting, it's between summer and March that we'll sit there and vote you all off the island and bring in whomever.
So the next guys we're going to listen to. And as always, there's much more than one would fit in a 2-day meeting, but I think it gives you a sense of where we
Well, we keep queuing these things up. We try to
Okay.
keep a rolling list of things.
So something that I personally feel is non-negotiable, and I think there's board support for this,
I love this.
is we want a talk on where is the sweet spot. What does Microsoft use as a basis for deciding when there's enough trustworthiness in something to let it out? Right?
It's an FSR question, an SDL FSR question.
Well, it's also a
Look,
privacy
I want to.
question.
It's basically what's in Alchin's head. When he kicks a product one way or another, it's because he's making a trade-off between ship date, features, security, and we feel that we need to understand that in order to give you comments at the right level and not impose unrealistic expectations for trustworthiness on products or that are or just our own opinions. And
As long as you're not expecting a bright line.
no, but
We'd be upset if we got a bright line.
and it's the sort of thing that I think you're going to get. We're going to get. As you know, I have asked many people in
That's
this.
a Mike Nash stuff, Charlie.
Well, I asked Mike Nash. He told me to talk to Dan.
Talk to Charney, he'll do it, yeah.
Dan Chiappas.
No, it's not. Mike and I,
It's
here's
a-
what happens. When things don't pass the SDL, and the SDL guys say that this can ship, if they're insistent on shipping, it gets escalated to Mike and I. And then Mike and I sit down with Steve, and often it's resolved at that level. If it's not resolved at that level, and Mike goes to Jim Alchin and I go to Craig Monday, it's usually resolved at that level.
So then I haven't said well enough what the problem is. I would also like us, at the end of this session, to have a much better idea on how it could be decided that Longhorn, it was decided some months ago, was going to radically be changed and planned to ship with some amount of old Windows code next summer, say. That was not it's not the SDL, we're ready to ship. That was a very strategic decision made about it, and it was a trade-off made, and it might have been a reasonable trade-off, I don't know, but there's somebody has a cocktail party version of how secure is secure enough, how much risk you can take from old code and all these things. We don't have that sense. I don't know if any one person has the sense, but I think the board would benefit, and I actually think Microsoft would benefit from having people at the right level have this discussion in front of us and respond to questions and try to make this concrete. So this became very clear to me when I saw after our last meeting what happened to Unity and what's happened to Longhorn. Things are just changing out from under us after we evaluate them in ways that make sense from a business point of view, perhaps, but we don't have the cards in the deck to help. So that's, I think, priority number one.
It's not the details, it's simply the sensitive, just getting sensitized on what is the process you guys use to get to certain decisions.
I know what we want to do. I think I know what you're asking for, and I know how to get that set up, and we will get that for you. We're doing some of it publicly in the next month or so, and I can get that deck when it's ready and just email it to you, or however David does that. But there's a discussion to be had anyway, and we'll do that in the next meeting.
Okay. So then the next thing is people would like to hear about future directions of the company vis-a-vis security, and we suspect Scott might be the right person to give your inaugural, if you will. A question, for example, that comes up is, what's the research strategy for security? Is it directed? Is it just be opportunistic when things come up? But there's also product strategies. Trustworthy computing was a strategic initiative. What's next? What's happening with it?
Issue-driven security stuff. We actually kicked off a couple of weeks ago with Steve Ballmer a different way of thinking about our security strategy to solve problems. And we're now, while I was waiting for you guys to have your internal deliberations, was writing up the straw man paper. And although I don't know if you're going to share that, I don't know, I can certainly share with you how we're evolving the way we think about this, because we actually are taking, like everything else, there are parallel tracks, but we're along different paths. We're taking a different perspective on the security problem from a consumer enterprise market view, and trying to change the way we decide what we have to do to solve big problems. I'm happy to share that.
Great. So we like this identity management presentation. We need to see, we think, the next level of details. I know I had some technical questions afterwards. I was asking Martine about them. We're not sure how this really works. Dick was saying he sat back and he thought, well, how can I break in, and realized he didn't know enough about the system to answer that
To be able to, yeah.
So we need to have a
So do you want Kim back and?
Arun was very helpful
It may
too.
be we want to read back.
I peppered him with a lot of questions.
Well, I think it's it's usually these talks wind up being a combination of a number of people to fill in the needed context for this kind
They
of
have
stuff.
architectural schematics. in
We saw
PowerPoint.
some of those, but
Right.
there were a lot of questions about where data is stored and what's
Right, but
being
I think-
trusted.
To some extent, a lot of that has been documented, at least internally within the group, and maybe what we really have to do is just spend more time drilling into each little component on the various slides. Say, okay, here's the credential store, here is how we're using WS Trust to access it, here's the security profile we're using under the WS Star standard, here's this, here's that. That stuff they have, so I think they'll be able to share it. I should tell you too, there's a push in part within the company, particularly from Craig Mundy and myself, to, move this stuff to the hardware, even pre-MSCA by going to TPM or something like that. And we've been engaged in fairly lengthy discussions with the product group, so that's not a software solution. And they've been analyzing that and sending me papers. And so we might be able to get just some pre-reading on some of that stuff. And
If that's the level of detail that we're
okay.
It might make sense for us to hear again about Unity. Our spies suggest that project has changed in its direction and its niche in the marketplace, and that may or may not make sense. You folks are building a search engine, MSN Search, and there are likely to be privacy problems associated with search. And rumor has it that Google has hired various security people. And that suggests there are likely to be security problems associated with search. So maybe at some point we need to have a meeting and talk about
I've actually talked to Ashmomo about that as well, and he's willing to talk about this kind of stuff.
Did the topic of ad serving, ad marketing come up in contract with the search as well?
We just observed, this was the look around, see who's doing what, see what Microsoft is doing. Oh, Microsoft's doing search. What security trustworthiness issues come up, and we haven't looked any further than that.
So one of the topics that we had thought should be tabled for a board meeting is the whole ad strategy, since it's a significant portion of MSN's future revenue. So it should be, I think, looked at.
But there are other privacy problems associated with search that Google is worried about.
Oh yeah.
Well, they just got tagged, yeah.
But I think that
They're a little.
relative to ad surfing, the whole privacy thing is pretty minor.
I don't think our search rates relate privacy is just because nobody uses it.
Right.
Yeah, there's a get out of jail free card for
Very
you.
good marketing ploy. Use our search engine because you could find out everything you're not allowed to.
It's not the solution you want going forward.
No.
We understand there's some kind of a Windows security model task force happening. Butler, Oxsmith, Steve. Yeah, so,
The chair is sitting here.
well, we feel neglected. We would like a briefing. Then there's a
So that's
question.
for the words, you know.
Big Top,
Next meeting.
No, we're gonna-
Let's not walk down that road right now.
that was another. Big Top might be interesting for us.
That's Manfredelli.
Yeah, Manfredelli's he's ready to go, or he will be. At some
He said maybe in the summer.
maybe in the summer.
Right.
Yeah.
We haven't heard much about anti-spam.
Do you want to? There's products, there's laws, there's up to you guys. Ryan Hamlin can come in, and Ira does the legal part. Ryan runs the group, but it's
Actually, do you need
kind of
help
a
on it?
mature-
Is there anything
thing.
to say? Is there anything? Maybe we don't need to hear about it.
Well, I'm just waiting. So the weird thing about spam is the field has matured quite a bit. That the ability to influence early
is
kind
past
of
it.
gone.
That sounds
There
bad.
won't be continued evolution and all that stuff. But some of the stuff you hear about, like this ID stuff, there's nothing launched yet. You know, this is on the drawing boards, people are coding and all that. Compared to spam, where yeah, you can talk about evolution of filters and
Right. So I neglected to say that I'm kind of reading these in the order of most important.
That was going to be my question. You know, how
Yeah, so
what's the priority on that one?
Amitabh is now working on Windows. There have been all kinds of process changes. We might make sense for us to get a sense of that. And there's a fellow, Chris Walker, apparently, who has lots of good statistics about bugs and what parts of the process are broken. It might be useful to hear about that. I already mentioned Avalon seems like a better way to spend time than IE. Singularity is a research system.
Yeah, Galen. I can talk to Galen. Galen should be ready to go.
So there is some reluctance on the board to hear about research because we believe it'll be a great talk, we'll have a lot of fun, and it won't be such good use of our time for you. So you have to think through the research.
I'm particularly aware of that because there've been a number of comments over the past 3 years where board members have indicated that they want to know that there's something out there beyond Windows. So given that that comment exists or has existed in the past, Big Top, Singularity, all sort of in the same bucket there.
Well, Big Top is not in the research division, and Singularity is. That's why Big Top was rated higher on the list.
Yeah. Well, fair enough.
And then the last thing is, we haven't really heard anything about doing privacy preservation on your database systems. You have a product, database product, and other databases, and privacy may well end up having a role, market differentiation, being a basis for innovation, and we'd be interested in knowing to what extent you're going to grow in that direction.
part of the data governance stuff.
Talk a little more about privacy preservation. I don't understand what you mean.
Well, when Brian was here, we heard some about kind of DRM as a privacy management tool, but to the extent in the database products, are there privacy pieces being integrated?
Yeah, data encryption, for example.
Yeah, how are you thinking about data protection?
That's part of data governance.
Or data governance, yeah. Yeah, some of it's in that deck.
Authorization, access, data
But
encryption.
That we now have.
yeah.
Okay, so that's the end of my prepared notes. Is there anybody on the board who wants to say anything that I left off or that I didn't
No,
leave
but
off?
I think the comment about we want to hear the stuff early enough that people want to hear our comments is a really good guideline.
I will say one other thing. You made a comment about some of the stuff that MSR is doing and what's the value to us. I would also say that notwithstanding everything else, from my perspective, there's nothing wrong in the course of a 2-day meeting if you have an hour or an hour and a half presentation on something just because you find it interesting and fun.
Okay.
Even if there's no great feedback for you to give us, but you're just curious and you're curious where research is going, we wouldn't want to wait the whole meeting in 2 days and get no feedback. On the other hand, in return for your commitment and time, saying you can have a little fun during the process and have a session.
I'm against that. I think we should just work them.
Booth 111. We want to have Booth 111.
We want to go to the Microsoft house.
That's like Area 51.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can hook that up.
We can do the house.
Sure.
Do they get to go to the store too?
They can get whatever they want to. All I have to do is email me.
All right. But you can actually go to the store, so you get a coupon for $60 or something. Buys you almost.
I can go buy you like Microsoft Cush balls, all sorts of fun stuff, Oh yeah, fingerprint readers. But your students wanted to beat them up. That's why I sent them to you. Yeah, sure, knock yourself out. So.
My students are having a good time.
Yeah, the fingerprint, the digital persona stuff. So.
But sometimes it's a little ironic that, for instance, Jeff Freeberg was asking us if we knew of anything like tools to help do this privacy annotation and privacy testing and so on. And then I reminded him that at MSR there was actually a tool. So,
That's just the size of the company.
Yeah,
I find
yeah.
that all the time.
well, he actually knew about it, but I also
forgotten that he knew
knew,
about it, yeah.
I also knew that that project had died off, and so.
So about 25% of my time is being around it. People come and brief me on stuff. You know, the elliptical curve cryptography people came to brief me, and it was 4 weeks after the mobile people told me they couldn't put crypto on the device because the overhead was too up. So I told the elliptical people to go talk to the mobile. Well, this happens all the time in this company because we really don't have an inventory system of knowing what's under
Well,
development.
there's too much going on.
It's just too hard.
I mean, part of that's in the other side of my group, you know, Kevin's organization, the PMs trying to go out into the product groups and figure out where opportunities exist, and then vice versa, going out and trying to find out, okay, if we do have something we could actually meet those. So I can pick up the game a little bit with that as well. So.
Well, I have no further remarks. I guess the board has no further remarks.
Are there a set of particular questions that you are going to forward on to me? Oh, individual stuff. Okay. Yeah, well, there's the individual feedback stuff, but what I want to know if there's a codified set of things that you want to know about across the board, as opposed to individual stuff.
I actually think, just from reading the comments last time, and I actually should have done this, I just didn't have the bandwidth. I'm fine with getting the individual comments, because when I read through them, I put little marks on the questions and issues people have raised that just seem like get back points.
Good, okay.
And so,
Right.
Easiest thing for us to do.
Well, I think I like better the idea that you see 15 individual people's views than that one of us distills it, because you lose information.
You also see how important one issue might be because 15 people say this.
One observation, though, when you read the comments are good and very, in many cases, very succinct, but sometimes there may be that much that's buried right in the middle. So if you are going to send us something, right up front, I want to know about this. And that will make it easier for us to be able to sit there and get that question answered. You know, it doesn't lack the context any, but, you know, somehow flag, this is what I want to know about, and that will make things...
The more you're writing at the presentation, and the less we have to try and figure out what he's getting.
Right.
But I will say, for the most part, the comments are very crisp.
No, yeah, they are. They are.
Easy to identify what's...
All right. Well, with that, if there are no more comments, I guess it's
great.
Meeting closed.